Welcome back to All Things Recon. We're on episode 20 now.
Big 2-0. Holy cow.
Yeah, we've been doing this for a few years now. Every third Thursday of the month, we cover a new topic in the reconditioning space. And this is an interactive webinar. So if any of our participants, any of those listening on, would like to participate in the conversation, we'd love to hear from you. This is a place not only for us to share our knowledge and our understanding, but also for all of our customers and prospects to also share their knowledge about recon.
That's strongly encouraged, guys. Feel free to raise your hands if you have input. I think this is going to be a really good episode to ask questions because, the standard workflow, what the best practice workflow is, that pretty much applies to any dealership. It'll vary from dealership to dealership, but I think what we're gonna, you got the workflow set, but we're also going to talk about the time expectations that cars should spend along the way, right? How long on average should cars spend in the inspection phase versus the repair phase, and what would be the goal expectation for detail? So this is a really good, probably a good meeting to take some notes, as we've learned a lot as we talk to dealerships all over the country. And, we feel like the goal times that we set up, which would be the best practice, goal times for the workflow, you can achieve 5 days, right? 5 days or better, average days in recon or time to life, so to speak.
Yeah, and we're also going to be talking a little bit about the rationale of, how we build workflows in the first place. What are the things that go into considering if you're going to put a step into your workflow or not, or how do you use the workflow to measure your process? So this is all goes hand in hand with the usage of our tools. And so if you have no context for the word workflow and what that means for rapid recon or velocity, then you might be a little bit behind on this discussion. But for everyone else who is firmly entrenched in our tools, I think talking about the workflow, and we'll show you some visual examples as well. But I think this will be a great way to understand how do you lay out your process, how do you think about your process, who's responsible for what parts of your process, and how do you lay that out in a chain of accountability, chain of responsibility.
And so the graphic we're going to pull up, Josh, is actually Rapid Recon Pro or Velocity, right? But there'll be some slight differences between the Rapid Recon Legacy workflow, the way that looks. But at the end of the day, I think what they'll be looking at would be relevant to regardless of whether they were a Legacy or a Velocity or a Pro user.
Yeah, I think let's just jump into it, Bob. Let's go ahead and get the workflow on the screen, and then I think that'll be a great guide for our discussion. So here, I'll just share my screen here with the rest of the team, or rest of the audience here. And luckily, when we're zoomed in like this, we can't even see who we're looking at. So
sorry, guys, it's hard to make that screen any bigger, so you might have to focus or put on your glasses. But I think even just a dialogue that we're going to have either way, it will start to make sense. So
yeah, really, you only need to focus on this element of the screen here, this left-hand side that I've highlighted here. We're talking about the workflow. We're talking about how do I lay out my process from top to bottom.
Perfect.
So where do you want to start, Bobby? I mean, and I think I'd like to hear from you mostly about, what are your prescriptions for time? Because, when it comes to me, I really like to hear more from the dealer about their specific situation before I, make a suggestion. Of course, I'm sure you're the same way. But as far as, default times goes or expectations, that we might say were standard across the country, what do you think? Obviously, we start on day 0, right? So we might as well just skip this part of the process unless you had something to say about transit times.
No, 100%. No, let's start there because, starting on day 0 is just kind of a, how do you start on day 0? It's almost like doesn't make sense. But the goal is if the car is here and ready to go, it should be in the damn shop or it should be in the process, right? So, as you see at the top there, that incoming step, that's kind of the receiving bucket, the receiving step from whatever you're using, whether you're using vAuto, VinQ, what other, Max Digital or, whatever IMS you're using, cars should import automatically into that incoming bucket, right? Says, hey, we now possess this vehicle. We own it, right? We got money and we bought this vehicle. It's now in our inventory. But the next step, so the incoming being just the receiving step, cars should really spend no duration of time in that step, right? If they're here and ready to go, let's get it moved down to, I know they got like manager approval up towards the top there, but let's get it down into the RO write-up step. Okay, if the car's not here yet, put it in transit. If the car you took it in on, trade, they don't have a trade hold, or do they have a trade hold? Have a
Uh,
trade hold step. Put it in a trade hold if the car's not ready to go through. Otherwise, the car should be in the RO write-up step. So cars should really spend no reasonable amount of time in the incoming step. Because
yeah,
if you're not starting on it, there's probably a step that would indicate why you're not starting on it right away, right? Some dealerships have trade hold where you took it in on trade, or let's say they bought a new car. The new car is not at the dealership yet, and the customer's still driving the trade. And when the new car arrives at the dealership, they're going to come to the deal, and now but we did the deal ahead of time, right? So um, yeah, that incoming phase should be something that is monitored probably by the front end by the managers or
yeah,
the inventory guys. The used car department should somehow be pushing these cars in, and be mindful. You don't want to push cars into the RO write up step unless the car is actually physically, and the keys and the packet or whatever you do is actually over in service and accessible.
yep, exactly. And that's one. What I would add there is simply that I think our dealers that have troubles, one of the first things that is sort of a identifier for that, or if there's some sort of incongruence between sales and service, one of the first things I look at is how are units moving out of the incoming step. And for the overall health of recon, it really is best to have the sales management, used car director, used car manager directly overseeing this incoming step, and being the one that pushes those cars to service once they verify the units are on the ground. It seems like a trivial step, like it just needs to get into RO write-up, right? But it is important that that final handoff comes from the used car manager or from someone with that authority over the process, authority over the units themselves,
Mm-hmm.
because that engenders a sense of urgency, and it's really important that that handoff happens smoothly and cleanly, saying the car is here, this is what I want to do with it, this is my expectation for recon, now it's yours. Um,
Right.
and I just think that that starts everything off on the right foot in terms of how the custody of that unit moves from the sales into the service department.
And whether here's a good opportunity too to take note of anything you need that needs to take place with the car outside of the shop, outside of mechanical, right? So let's tag these cars for if it needs wheel repair, right? If the long, we talk about it, the lost art of the trade walk. Some stores do it, most stores don't, right? But if there is a process where you're kind of making up the plan for the car in advance, do you want to CPO the car? Is it just a UBI? Is it just a safety? Does it need wheel repair, paint, touch up, whatever? Let's mark and communicate that stuff up front, and then get these cars into the RO write-up step, right? Which would be the first active go time step in this workflow.
Yep.
So, Josh, if you want to, I'll hand it over to you for what your thoughts are about that RO write-up step.
RO write-up. I mean, the actual step itself. Now, this is this gets into like the little details, of language. I prefer to call this step open RO. A lot of times it'll be called RO write-up. But really, all you're doing is you're just starting the repair order off. You don't have to add any lines to it. You don't have to price anything out. We just need to get the RO open. That's our
Other the inspection line, of
the
course.
inspection line, of course. But the actual repairs, we're not doing anything in terms of like the work of the inspection yet. We're just opening the repair order. We're just starting it off in service, and this is the handoff step where service takes custody of the vehicle. And really, this should be, I think, 30 minutes at the very most.
Yeah, and we usually set our timers. Turn yellow after 15 minutes. Turn red after 30 minutes. Right. That should
Yep.
be. How long does it take to write up an RO? Right. If you have the information, uh, 30 seconds. Right.
Yeah.
Let's get the RO written. Make sure we put the RO number in the notes. That's another huge thing too when using our recon tool. Putting that RO number in the notes. Not only does it communicate downstream to everybody that needs an RO, which is pretty much everybody, those two parts and parts codes, but it also becomes searchable. So now you can search and pull up that car by the RO number because the RO number is in the notes. So,
Exactly. Another thing I'd say about RO write-up is that a lot of our dealers will end up using RO write-up as a dispatch step as well, and I think that that's a whole thorny topic, right, Bobby? Maybe maybe we don't need to talk about dispatch quite yet, but
yeah,
the
we'll get
the
there though.
uh,
Damn dispatch step.
um, that's just something like a little caveat I want to keep in mind. I'd prefer to use RO write up specifically for what it is for, and if you have issues with dispatch times, which you shouldn't if you have a dedicated team, but if you do, then make a separate dispatch step. And the point of that is just to this is going to go into the this is something we're going to reemphasize, but your workflow should be unambiguous. I should be able to take somebody, a new hire that you took a week ago that just basically understands the rudiments of your process, make and sit them down in front of this workflow, and they should be able to figure out exactly what each step means. There should never be a step where it's a mystery as to what does this step mean or who's responsible for it. If every step in your workflow is accounted for in terms of which of your personnel is going to be responsible for it and what actually takes place in that step, if those things are unambiguous, then you're going to have your process run a lot more smoothly just by default. It's when you introduce these, oh, it's an RO write up, but really we're just waiting to put it in front of a tech. Like when I look at the reporting and I'm trying to, analyze that in conjunction with the dealers, that kind of ambiguity is the stuff that screws things up where I can't make a definitive statement about how we're going to improve recon because the reporting isn't telling me what's going on. And I'm sure
Right.
Bobby can attest to
Yeah, the
that.
goal. So it's what we call a pass-through step, right? It's a communication step. Here's a car, write it up, put it in the shop, get it with somebody, and you kind of alluded to it, Josh. That, again, that's another step. Cars should really not spend a whole ton of time in RO write-up. Okay, you should go ahead and get these cars already with technicians as soon as possible, especially if you have the dedicated team. They should always know what their next car is, right? Boom. We know Joey Bag of Donuts or whoever you have, Johnny the technician, can't work on 4 cars at the same time, but he can have 4 cars in his step, and he should. That's a good problem to have, right? Because you always know what your next car is. You finish this car, you move it on to the next, on to the next. So you kind of want to keep your technicians. It's a transfer of accountability. We never want, it should be in concept, it's a push concept. It shouldn't be a pull concept to where vehicles are always being pushed forward to somebody, and that person is now accountable because the clock's running. You never want to create a situation where cars are sitting and let's say an awaiting dispatch step or the RO step, waiting for a technician to feel like coming up to get his next car, right? So, we want to influence the sense of urgency. It's a hot potato. It's a transfer of accountability. Write up the RO, put the RO number in the notes, and put it with technicians. I would love it if take the shop foreman out of it sometimes, depending on your shop. Okay, but I feel like, in my opinion, used cars should be on their own little planet, right? If you have, especially your dedicated couple technicians, which is the best practice, by the way, right? Have a used car team with used car only technicians. You should be able to write the RO and drop it. You should be able to see right on that workflow who's got cars and who doesn't, right? And just fill the gaps. If you want to be even Steven, then you rotate. Super easy. But these cars, especially at this point, RO's written, let's get it in queue so it's on somebody's plate.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. No ambiguity. Custody of the unit is all. Everybody knows who's responsible at all times, and that just it keeps things flowing, keeps things nice and smooth. There's never any question. You don't have to go hunt down cars. You know who to look for. You can message
Mhm.
people in the notes of our system. So,
Yeah.
but moving on, Bobby, I think it's worth mentioning, especially for a lot of dealers will still get no, we don't get it as much anymore, but we still get feedback saying, I want less steps or I don't want that many steps in my process. And I totally understand that from just a design standpoint, wanting to keep things simple. But
Mhm.
why do we recommend having these technician inspection steps and then following with the technician repair steps? Do you see that as redundant, Bobby, or do you see why we do
Oh,
that?
yeah, you led me into that one. And I see it be naturally. People think that bigger, larger workflow means more complicated. It really doesn't. It just means better drill down, right? Better drill down and better being able to analyze, your bottleneck report or your step report. But yeah, to note, Josh, the inspection phase. So each technician in this workflow has an inspection phase, right? They have an inspection step, and then down below they have the repair step. And in between the inspection and the repair, you have the approval process, right? That's a big deal, I think, because not only if you are going to have this also be the transparency tool that it's designed to be, what's happening whenever they take a car in, Josh? They're getting this car on the internet. This car is for sale, I promise you. If you own this car, it's in Ely, or I'm sorry, it's in V Auto. That's probably on your website. Even if it's waiting for the picture, you're going to have customers inquiring, inbound leads, and there's a big difference between a car being inspected and a car being repaired, right? It could be a couple days, right, of the availability of that car. No, they can't come drive it if it's an inspection step, right? So not only do you know it's in the shop, you know who it's with, and then you know which phase the car's in. And that's could be a big deal if somebody's going to drive 40 minutes to your dealership to come test drive a car. Right?
100%. And there's two things I'd add there, Bobby. One is that it's also unambiguous for the technician, right? So if they know if they're getting a unit in their inspection step, this is their first time looking at the unit.
Yep. Yep.
90% of the time. And then if it's in
Yep.
their repair step, that means that the unit has been through the approval process, the lines have been added to the repair order, and the parts are in. That kind
Yep.
of assuredness is so great for technicians, and I think that that is one of the big things that I always lead with when talking to them is that you're not going to have to chase your ticket around with when you implement this tool. When you
Right.
get that car back in your step, all the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, you're ready to go. Just finish out your repairs and push the car forward.
Yep. Yep.
The second thing is that with the inspection and repair steps clearly marked like this, we can do this with our workflows where we have a mechanical inspection section that we can account for in the reporting. So we can see, overall how long does it take us, from RO write up till the approval being finished, right?
Mhm.
And then how long does it take us from the approval being finished to the repairs being finished? So I think that having that assuredness of being able to track that very specific metric across all of these steps by having that inspection and then that repair phase, I just think that that's so cool.
Yeah.
Because then we can look and we can see the entire inspection process prior to approval. What does that look like? And then post
Mhm.
approval, what does that look like? And those are the two most important things. Is really like how fast do we inspect the vehicle, and then once parts are in, how fast do we redispatch to the tech? Those are like the two biggest struggles that I see as far as the mechanical reconditioning portion goes. Is getting the inspection done quickly and then getting parts on once they've arrived.
And then
Um,
of course we can't get through this without talking about fast approvals, but we'll get there in a second. But yeah,
yes.
so rule of thumb, guys, the inspection phase of a car should be about 1 day. 1 day on average. So when you look at your reporting, let's say 100 cars in the month went through your process. Cars on average should spend no more than 24 hours in the inspection phase and 24 hours in the repair phase, right? I know we occasionally get those special victim cars, right? There's a lot more going on, right? It might take a couple days, transmission work, big tickets, right? If you're going to keep the car, but as a rule of thumb, in the grand scheme of things, as an ideal, 1 day in inspection phase, 1 day in repair phase. So great. Technician inspects the car. He can probably get paid his 1.5 and really inspect the car in what, half an hour, 45 minutes, do all his recommendations, and then push that car to what? The parts quote. If your parts department is involved in the process, sometimes there's a parts quote step where the parts department will go into the estimate that you built in Rapid Recon or Velocity and put in the parts pricing, right? And then there's an inspection complete, which kind of will cue the internal advisor, hey, I call it to make sure we're not smoking crack step, but take a look at this estimate, make sure the labor's right, the parts are right before it gets in front of a used car manager for approval. Okay. So that part should take about 1 day on average. Then you get it into the UCM approval step, right? Or the needs approval step.
It looks
And
like for this store, inspection complete is their approval step it
yeah,
would seem.
they moved their UCM approval up towards the top, Josh, because I think the manager
Oh,
just like
that's
looking at
right.
it at the top. Okay, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where it's still going to ping the managers. But uh, one of my huge things, guys, I always get on stores. Always do not be slow at approving work. Used car managers, used car department, whoever. If you got to think about it fast, and try to get approvals done. I think we set a 15 to 30 minute goal time for approvals of work, right, Josh?
Yeah, by
And
default.
yep, and I always say this, you've heard it a million times coming out of my mouth at least. You got no business guns ablazing looking for your cars if you cannot approve work in a timely fashion. And I know a
Yep.
lot of the service side guys are probably doing jumbo jacks, hallelujah, right? Because there's nothing worse than having slow approvals. And then you're going to train your shop that, you're not going to hear back today on this. So, I'm going to park the car outside. keys on my bench, I'm on to my next car. And then
Yes.
I'm what, 2, 3 cars deep by the time I hear back on that approval. And now I got to get out from underneath everything. And it's just add 2 to 3 days to any car that you are slow approving work on, right? Because you're
Yep.
going to miss parts cutoff times. You're going to create inconvenience for the technicians, and then it's just going to perpetuate from there.
100%. And I think that all past the technician inspection, in our standardized or default workflow, you'll often see this arrangement, something like this: parts quote, labor quote, and then there would be approval. Now, for this workflow, they've got approval up here where the managers are consistently looking, but usually we put it down here. And then you have
Right.
approval complete. So there's a few things I want to highlight here. And one is that all of these steps, basically, all of the post technician inspection, building the quote steps, these are what I like to call controllables because they're the most controllable portions of the process. We're really not at the mercy of any other factors other than our attention. So these are the steps where I think it should always be consistently, parts quote under an hour, at the very most. 30 minutes would be my recommendation. Labor quote 30 minutes, approval 30 minutes, and then critically acknowledging that approval and then building the lines into your repair order in your DMS is also critically important. So that's another 30-minute goal time for me there. So
Yep.
that portion of the process is where a lot of the actual thinking work gets done in terms of just building out the numbers, making the final decision on the investment in the vehicle, getting the parts ordered. And that's where we can almost immediately. That is where I always coach dealers to look to get their times down first, because everything
Mhm.
else is going to be a lot more complicated to address. It's going to depend on the skill levels of your technician. It's going to depend on your process for dispatching units. Do you have a shop foreman? What kind of resources are available to your people? Like, that's going to be a deeper discussion. But as far as how can I immediately bring my times down universally, you address these controllables. That's how you do it,
Yep. And
first and foremost.
that it's just information getting. That's all those steps are. The approvals. Okay. So I liked what you said, Josh. It's great that we get the fast approvals. Well, how fast do we react to the fact that something's approved? That's just as important. Get the lines
Yes.
added to the RO and then get parts ordered. If it's on parts hold, make use of the parts hold step. If the part's going to be any more than a day or 2 days out, or if it's on back order, if it's something that, advance, you know, auto parts is going to run down to you in 30 minutes, don't bother. But get it then down. And if the parts are here, get it into the repair phase, right? Into the repair step of that technician. Again, 1 day in inspection, 1 day in repair. Remember, as a total, we want to be about 5 days, 5 days or less. I know there's still the 3 day pipe dream out there, but we relax it to 5 days because most dealerships want their car standing tall. They want to be thorough. It needs to be absolutely ready to be delivered to a customer, right? So there's your
Our,
one day,
our
1 day.
3-day
So
dealers are in very particular situations that allow
right,
them to do that.
yep. So great. It comes back in the repair phase, and ideally, if you're getting fast approvals, they should be ready. Nothing better than if you got the parts in stock, the car's still on the lift when you get the approvals of work. This tool helps everybody stay put. It uses the technology to communicate what needs to be approved, right? Approved, decline. Nobody has to leave their spot. You don't have to go running across the dealership with a piece of paper, right? If you use our tool properly, you can have pictures supporting what you're recommending, but that should be a very fast process. So 1 day, get cars in, 1 day in inspection, 1 day in repair. And so now we're about 2.5 days deep, right? That'll all the wish wash of parts hold and things like that kind of washes out, right? Because it's a law of averages. So, and then after the repair phase, right? After the shop, it's most cars are probably going to go to detail unless
Worth
they need
mentioning.
something.
Oh, unless they need something, I was just going to mention. Worth mentioning. This is repairs complete. This is another common thing we see. This is a confirmation steps. This is another controllable where all we're doing is confirming that we've done the work correctly. In that everything as far as the repair order is finished. Um, so if you have a step like this where mechanical complete, service complete, where you're verifying or confirming that the work has been completed, just be quick on that as well. It's another 30
Yeah,
minutes, another super speedy one.
right.
Uh, yep.
Right. And then,
Move.
it gives the opportunity for an internal writer to redirect that car. Does it need vendor work or can it go to detail? Right.
Yep.
So,
But now we get into detail.
yep. So it looks like they got their actual detailers broken out, individually. So they got some really good drill down. Not only do you know the cars in detail, which detailer is responsible for it. Okay. That's hit or miss. That's not important. Detail's more of usually a team anyway. They just like some better drill down at this particular store.
I
Um,
love to see this though, because that lets me know that the detail manager is on the tool and that they also use this to coordinate and to measure their team, which is great.
yeah, yeah. So
And
Josh, what do you
oh,
think
go
the
ahead.
average? I'm sorry. What would be your ballpark? What would be a good goal time for the detail department?
Um, 24 hours, I would say,
Yep.
is what I'm
I
looking
go a
for.
day, day and a half, right? 24, 36 hours, no more than a day and a half. If you're a day and a half, you're pushing it, right? But especially if you're, a store that doesn't necessarily do service washes. Okay, so they're either new car deliveries, right, or maybe washing new cars for the lot, or they're doing sold units, used cars, getting them ready for the lot, right? So you got about another day in detail. So day, day and a half in detail. So one day, one day. So now we're about 3.5 days in detail, or I'm sorry, 3.5 days by the time a car
Overall.
finishes detail, right?
Yeah.
And so that day and a half leaves some room for the cars that have to go to a vendor, maybe, for other specialty things, gives a little bit of wish wash in there. And then, of course, the photos, the picture take has
Yeah.
to
It
be
looks like
factored.
this store is not tracking pictures necessarily, but
Yep.
um,
A lot
what's
of
your
stores do that through
recommendation
the
there,
Viato.
Bobby? I think that's part of the process that I haven't had a chance to really review it in as much detail as other parts. And
Hmm.
if you've got a photo booth, I imagine it's a little bit more involved. But I mean, how long could it really take to do photos? Probably, I'd say, at least within an hour. I'd want them finished if they're coming out of
If
detail.
and a lot of it depends on if you rely on an outside picture company, a
Yeah.
picture
Yep.
photography, right? I think with the technology of just phones now and ease, you don't need a super expensive camera to take good pictures anymore, right? And then now you got AI and you got some other things kind of factoring in there. So the photo taking, I recommend everybody bring it in house. If you have on site, especially if you're doing pictures and detail up front, right, to get the pictures online before the car goes through the process, have somebody on site that does that. That's a you know make sure you're fast if you are going to do some pre-photos and pre-shoots. Couple minutes left, Josh. I want to remind everybody, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions if you have any input or questions about anything we're talking about, with just the best practice setup and the goal times as cars move through your process. I mean, this is a big discussion because it's you know um, it it's critical knowing what having expectations as you're managing a process.
Yeah, 100%. I think this is probably one that we could expand into a part 2 or 3, Bobby. We could talk about
Uh,
this, for ages. But I
yeah.
I I think the main things I wanted to emphasize, of course, was sort of our recommended times across the process, so I hope our listeners were rewarded there.
Hmm.
And also I wanted to get into the rationale of how you build a workflow. And, big takeaways I hope our listeners take from this is keep stuff unambiguous and always have that chain of accountability in mind so that there's always somebody who's responsible and you always know what the steps mean.
Hmm. And then the dedicated team too. This isn't a magic band-aid where you can just throw it in any dealership and it's just the tool's going to fix everything, right? I think more and more,
Push it back.
as especially in recent years, dealerships kind of figure it out. It is super important to dedicate some resources to the recon process. Here, I have an internal writer. I have a dedicated team. I got internal technicians, used car technicians specifically in the shop, depending on our volume. um, and if you don't have the dedicated technicians in the shop, at least have somebody whose full-time job it is to push and manage and encourage the efficiency of cars going through the main population of technicians, right? Because then you get that problem where cars are taking a back seat to customer pay. Your used cars, I promise you, they're not working on used cars if you are, you know, clocking 3-hour oil changes for your customers sitting in a showroom, asking every 10 minutes where their car is, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's huge. But 5 days is controllable. 5 days time, from the time you take the car in to the time it's frontline ready, is what we consider the industry best practice. You can strive for 3, but just make sure your cars are looking good and you're not having to apologize for your cars, right?
Well, I
So
think this was a great discussion. I think we've got some answers to our poll, and we're not going to close it just yet. We got
good
to,
stuff.
last minute
Appreciate
here,
the
y'all.
feedback.
Give us your vote on what our next topic should be, and we always want to keep things relevant to what's important for our listeners. We've got some choices here, and feel free to
Mhm.
message us. Even after the fact, if you just have an idea for a topic you'd love to hear us talk about, send an email our way, and we'll definitely put it in the running. But otherwise, I really appreciate the time that everyone spent with us, and I wish you a wonderful day.
Oh, got something from Aaron by before we cut here. Have you had issues with body shop bottleneck and remedies? Nothing. Body shop's never fast, Aaron. And I recognize Aaron. I think he's been on some of our shows before. Body shop is just one of those things. Good news is not every car goes to the body shop. Otherwise, recon would be horrible. Other than getting a good body shop and maybe sharing with them that, hey, there's a tool, and sometimes looping in the body shop. If you got body shop steps in your workflow, get your body shop access to the tool. So these cars, here they are turning yellow and red, and it's in body shop, and there's a program that shows how long the car's been at your. If I'm a body shop manager and I'm servicing a dealership that has a tool that is clocking how long it takes me to do something, I'm probably going to pay a little more attention to that dealership's cars, and and not drag out, or just maybe be urgent. Getting a hood painted should not take 10 days, right? So yeah, body shop is never fast, but just getting a good body shop and sharing the information. Nothing. It is very common for body shops to have access to the tool, and then they can communicate. They can copy and paste or upload invoices and communicate all that stuff right through Rapid Recon.
They
It's
can
super
also
cool.
see stuff coming down to them, right? So even if it's not available for them to work on right at that
Yeah,
moment, that'll help you prevent bottlenecking is if they
I
can see what
promise
they're
you.
going to be working on ahead of time.
I promise you, the body shop doesn't have a tool that tells you where all your cars are at. I promise. They don't even know where their cars are at, right? So how cool would it be to share it with the body shop? They got, here, they can look at that body shop step, and they can see all the cars that are technically down at the body shop, and with the clock ticking and how long it's been there, and communicate in the notes. So if it's your own body shop, even better. But it's been quite frequent, Josh, I think you can agree, when we're out in the field, that we loop in. If there's body shops that you consistently use and reputable ones, get them a login. Body shop at whatever dealership, get them a login to Rapid Recon or Velocity, and they can keep an eye, second set of eyes, and manage and communicate within their body shop workflow.
Yeah, and
Great
if
topic, Aaron. That's a tough one to manage because we're relying on people outside the dealership in most cases to hurry up with our cars.
Yeah, and if they're professional, they'll be happy to have to be on the tool because it'll be an opportunity to communicate with you and to keep track of their own work. So this will be
Mhm.
they'll see the value in it for themselves. Another thing I would say, Aaron, is this goes hand in hand with standardizing your process. So I would create a body shop tag in your system if you're in the Pro Tool. Otherwise, in Legacy, just leave a note, sort of pinned to the top, and just have your body shop search your inventory according to that tag or according to that note. And so that way they can kind of see what's coming down ahead of time. And if you have pictures, especially of the damage, that might be able to help them get an idea of what kind of work they're going to is going to be required of them once the car actually comes into, so if they have to order parts, if they have to get anything into the shop prior to the car becoming available to them, they can do that, and hopefully that'll stop a little bit of the bottlenecking issues. But really, it's going to come down to, body shop bottlenecking. That's kind of something that'd be a little bit rare, wouldn't you agree, Bobby? I mean, yeah, body shop takes a while, but bottlenecking, I don't know.
Well, I think you meant bottlenecking by the cars just took forever, right?
Okay, what I mean is that what I think is there's so many cars are queued up and they can't address them in time. You know what I mean? That's what how
Okay.
I would take bottlenecking. But
Yep.
that
Maybe
that
maybe some dialogue. I saw his second comment there. He does it. So he's set up for the bot. They're involved, right? Their body shops to have some dialogue. Have some,
yeah, I would reach out to your CSM, Aaron, and get a performance consultation scheduled. You might be talking with me or Bobby about it, but yeah, we'll hear from you. We'll talk about it in detail with you. So really appreciate
great.
your question, Aaron.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're 5 minutes over, but hey, great conversation, and we appreciate everybody hanging out, participating. So,
Thanks, everybody. See you for the next
all right.
one.
Thank you.
Third Thursday every month.
Third Thursday of every month. Good stuff.